So for this type of equation, when we want to solve by completing the square, we are going to start out like you did on the other one you did. We need to make sure that our coefficient of the y squared is 1. And the way we do that is divide by 4. So we'll go ahead and divide everything by 4. The difference in this one and the one that you did earlier was, well, it's that our y term doesn't turn out to be a whole number or an integer like it was on the one that you did. So now we have y squared, and we'll just leave these others fractions like they are. So minus 5/4 y minus 9/4 equals 0. Now we want to add 9/4 to both sides. So the rest of the steps will look just like they do when you complete the square and anything else. The only difference is now we have fractions in ours. So we do need to add 9/4 to both sides. And we'll have y squared minus 5/4 y equals 9/4. Now we need to figure out what we need to add to both sides. And we're going to take this coefficient of our y, the negative 5/4, and we're going to divide it by 2, and then we're going to square it. So I'm going to write that up here. Negative 5/4. Now when I divide that by 2, that's the same thing if I want to make that a 2/1, since we've got a fraction going here. If we have negative 5/4, and when we divide fractions, we flip the second fraction and multiply. So I can rewrite it this way, and that will give me negative 5/8. Now that's what I want to take and square. So negative 5/8, I'm going to have to square it. And when you square a fraction, you just multiply it by itself, which means you end up doing 5 times 5, which is 25, and 8 times 8, which is 64. And since it was a negative times a negative, it's now positive. So this is the number that we want to add to both sides. So we're going to add our 25/64 to both sides. So what we have now, I'm going to rewrite this as a perfect square. We figured out what we needed to add to make it a perfect square. And the reason I leave this in the corner here, this negative 5/8, I leave that because that tells me what I need in here in this parentheses. I need a y to make a y squared, and I need that minus 5/8. That is my perfect square. And if you do that, whenever you divide by 2 for that term, that is going to tell you exactly what you have in your perfect square. So always kind of leave that down. Even if it were a number like 6, when I divide by 2, I would have a 3. And I'll leave that written down somewhere so I'll remember if I need to have a negative 3 or positive 3 inside my parentheses for my perfect square. And on the other side, I have 9/4 plus 25/64. Now I'm going to work that out to the side also because I need to get a common denominator. So in order to get 9/4 and 25/64 to have the same denominator, well, 4 will go into 64. 64 is just 4 times 16. So if I multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 16, I'll have a common denominator. So I have 144/64 for my new fraction. This has got the same value, it just looks different. Plus 25/64. So now I can go ahead and just add my numerators, and that will give me 169/64 when I add that up. So I'm going to bring that back down here, and I have y minus 5/8 squared equals 169/64. And now that I have a square, perfect square on one side, I'm going to take the square root. If I take the square root of both sides, on this side I just have y minus 5/8. And on this side I have plus or minus. Now both of these, this one turns out nice, the numerator and the denominator are both perfect squares. So 169 is 13 squared. So that makes that a 13 when I take the square root. And on the bottom, the 64 is 8 squared. So I'm going to rewrite it as 13 over 8. So all we have left to do now is to add 5/8 to both sides. So we have y minus 5/8 can equal 13 over 8, or y minus 5/8 equals negative 13 over 8. And what's nice about both of these is the fractions that we have on these both have 8 as a denominator, so we won't have to go through the bit where we find a common denominator again. So just add 5/8 to both sides for both of these equations to get your solution. And on this one, 13 plus 5 is 18 over 8, which will simplify because those are both even numbers. So that gives us 9 over 4. And on this side, when we add 5/8 to both sides, we have y is equal to, now since that's a negative 13/8 on the top and then we're adding 5/8, we actually subtract and we're going to have a negative answer because the larger of those two numbers is the negative 13/8. So 13 minus 5 is just 8. And it's over 8, so we can rewrite that as negative 1. So those are your two solutions for this one, 9/4 and negative 1. Hopefully this helps you to be able to solve a similar one. And in the next section, we have an easier way of taking care of these quadratic equations that don't start out with just a y squared or a x squared. If they have a different coefficient than 1, we can use the quadratic formula, which is a little bit nicer, so hopefully you'll like that. And then when you take your final exam, you'll have a choice. You won't have to do it one specific way. It may say in the instructions to choose one way or the other, or it may just say choose the method that you like best, and it won't really matter when you take your final which way you work it out, as long as it's in the simplest form when you're done.